total my first meet, I was scared.
They decided deserved to be protected from me and from others like me.
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
But was scheduled today, so went to the garage. I've got an ex.
Shh. I closed my eyes. I was crying so hard. And all of a sudden he was there.
It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.
83 murders a day, thousands more deaths flagged as unnatural, and sitting at the intersection of science, law, and mortality is one field that has to get it right when the victim can't speak. Forensic pathology. Tonight we're taking a step back from a single case and unpacking the discipline itself, what happens from the scene to the autopsy table, how cause and manner of death are determined, how the unidentified are handled, and what happens when these findings end up in court. Joining us is Dr. Candice Hansmeyer, currently a fourth-year resident in the Department of Diagnostic and Molecular Pathology at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. A fellow countryman now then of Gerard Labuschagne. Before moving to Canada, Candice trained and worked as a specialist forensic pathologist in Johannesburg, graduating from Wits in 2005 and completing her forensic pathology residency in 2014. Her work spanned death investigation, post-mortems, negligence reporting, and extensive forensic pediatric pathology. She helped establish South Africa's first missing and unidentified persons unit, worked with the International Committee of the Red Cross, and was part of the inaugural forensic lecture series alongside Prof. Marina Brits. She's been at the front line of South Africa's medico-legal system, from mass casualty incidents to the most vulnerable child cases, and now continues her training and practice in Canada. Gerard, we've got quite the guest tonight. A field we've kind of touched on in the past, but tonight we're really going to have an opportunity to have a bit of a deep dive. We are pre-recording tonight, so so we won't be able to take your live questions and comments, but please do contribute to the chat. Do hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy the content that we create. It does help us. Of course, as always, I'm joined by the former head of forensic psychology at SAPS, Gerard Labuschagne. Hi, Gerard.
Hi, Paul. Hello, the listeners. I've got a bit of flu, so my voice is going to sound unusually husky today. So please forgive me, and I'll probably have a coughing fit halfway through our show today.
I get what's happening here. Not only the most gorgeous man in crime, but now a husky, sexy voice to go with it. Fantastic. Gerard, would you like to introduce our guest and we can say hello? Good evening, Candice.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Nice to hear your sexy voice, Gerard. Been a while.
It has. And I thought it would be great. I know, as you said, Paul, we've had, like Dr. Shakira Holland on our show. We've had Dr. Estelle van Staden. So I think what was for me interesting about asking Candice is, asking you, Candice, is that you've worked in kind of, you have exposure to the Canadian system and the South African system. And they're quite different in terms of the training process, which we're going to get into, but also like how the system works. And they have a coroner system, which is different to the forensic pathology system. So that's definitely stuff I really want us to get into, because people often don't really understand the nuances of how things are quite different in different countries for various reasons. But as always, we like to ask our guests, how did you personally end up in the field of forensic pathology? Because there's not necessarily something we get exposed to at school as a career option.
Yeah, and it's always a very interesting answer, because a lot of people do ask me this because it's so unique. Well, I suppose I've always been a bit of a frustrated surgeon. But I also really loved doing pediatrics. I did most of my training at the Baragwanath Hospital in Johannesburg, right next to the Soweto mortuary, funny enough. and did a lot of pediatrics there and did a lot of surgery. So I suppose the change came when I had my own children and realized at that stage my partner was a anesthesiologist, and spending many nights alone raising babies, I realized one of us had to stay home, and certainly it was me. I did, however, very interestingly enough, I had a boyfriend many years ago who was in the RIG unit. Actually, he was in that unit that's next to Barra and the mortuary, and he used to kind of tell me tales about, the Tokoza township uprisings and just fascinating stuff. And I suppose that's where I developed my interest for, guns, ammunition. And when I looked again, I was actually shadowing Dr. Holland, who then, it was the start of my journey and where I find myself today.
So how long did you actually practice, say, normal medicine before you kind of shifted over to forensic pathology?
I did a year of, well, in those days, it was the Zuma year, which was your community service. So we did a year of internship. I think it's changed since then because it was many years ago, but we did a year of internship, a year of Zuma community service. And then I did surgery. I had a child and dabbled a bit in family medicine. So I didn't do clinical medicine for long. I went into the realm of pathology quite early on in my career.
And just jumping back a bit, because what's interesting is that you actually went to what do they call it, the Pro Arte, the ballet school, arts and ballet school in Pretoria for high school. So had you originally thought about going into an artistic career instead?
No, I did go into an artistic career after school. I went to Pretoria Tech. I think it's since changed its name, but anyway, in those days it was Pretoria Tech. I did drama. I graduated. I went into the field of performance. I even auditioned with very well-known playwrights. But I never really got into it and felt I probably always wanted to be a doctor, but never really thought I could do it. So it was a drastic change from one field of drama to another.
I can imagine. Do you regret it? Do you wish you'd stayed in that field? I know often people feel like they not wish that they'd done something else, but they kind of go back and fantasize, actually, that would have maybe been a nicer thing to do.
Not at all. I don't have any regrets.
That's good. Now, I know that we already knew each other at least by 2011 because you did the autopsy on the body of Andrea Venter, who was murdered by her boyfriend, Gerard Janssen van Vuren. And I think we've discussed it on the show, but if you watch that documentary for the viewers, Original Sin, which I think was on Showmax, that's about that case. And in my own book, I refer to that as being one case I'd always wanted solved and the guy convicted, and that eventually happened. But what's your recollection of when we first met? Was it around that case, or was it possibly earlier?
Gerard, a good question. I think it was probably, I'm sure you were always in our morgue working on some other case. And I believe it was probably that case where we had a lot of interaction, often spoke over the phone. I remember we went through that autopsy report with a fine-tooth comb. You'd often come back with questions and I'd have to try and answer them or try and fit puzzles together. But I think that was our first introduction. But we had other cases, I think, too, that we worked on together. Maybe not you and I together, but certainly myself and some of your colleagues worked on a couple of cases I can remember well. Yeah. But that was the first case.
Yeah. Johannesburg mortuary was always our favorite mortuary because the people were very, very nice and helpful. So we loved working there, that's for sure. So you qualified as a forensic pathologist in South Africa. You worked for a short time, and then you relocated to Canada. And of course, perhaps this is where we can start talking about the training stuff. The pathway to becoming a forensic pathologist is not the same in Canada as it is in South Africa. So in South Africa, you do MBCHB, then you would either do the MMed or the college process. Both are basically 4 years, and you get registered as a forensic pathologist. Canada's a bit different. Can you just go into that? And then we'll go into the different systems of how things work in Canada versus South Africa.
Yeah, sure. So you're absolutely right. You can go one of two ways in South Africa with any speciality, whether it's surgery or medicine, but not forensic pathology. So you can either go the Royal College way, or you can go the university-affiliated MMed way. In South Africa, forensic medicine, by and large, you start with a diploma, which is a 6-month diploma. And then you are eligible to kind of, fulfill your daily job requirements of doing autopsy examinations, post-mortem examinations, compiling reports, and then obviously going to court if required. But you don't really require any additional training. So you could essentially stay a medical officer with some forensic pathology interest, or perhaps 6 months of specialized training indefinitely, or you could go ahead and become a specialist, which is what I did. So I went the Royal College route, which is what Wits did, and it's a 5-year program. So essentially you go straight into forensic pathology. You do a 5-year residency, and you do 2 exams. You do a part 1 and a part 2. Part 2 is really your final exam, where you have 3 days of examination. You have a written question, 2 days of written. You have some histology slides you have to look at. But during that 5 years, you also do a year of anatomical pathology. So for those people who are not familiar with anatomical pathology, those are the pathologists that look at tissues under slides or under the microscope. For example, if you have a lesion removed and you worried about, or the dermatologist, for example, or the plastic surgeon is worried about it being malignant, it gets sent to a particular laboratory, the tissue gets processed, and the anatomical pathologist then looks at it under the microscope, and with various ancillary tests can decide whether or not it's something to worry about or it's completely benign. So we do that in forensics. Obviously, we look at different spectrum of histology. So we're more interested in the heart and the brain and things that can cause sudden unexpected death or chronicity that's somehow implicated in unnatural death. So you can imagine we don't really delve into the intricacies of molecular medicine in terms of everyday malignancies and carcinomas like our colleagues in anatomical pathology do. So in South Africa, we're very specialized in that we do the bulk of our training in forensics. And actually this system was carried on and mirrored in Australia. And then we do our exams, and then we become forensic pathologists. However, in Canada, certainly North America, and even in Europe, it's different. They do anatomical pathology for 5 years. So they are first and foremost anatomical pathologists, a super speciality that's kind of tagged onto those 5 years of anatomical pathology. And then they write a second exam, a fellowship exam, and then they are eligible to then practice as forensic pathologists. So it was a huge, obviously, issue for me. Coming from a complete years ago, we were, and I think in many parts of the world, we still are revered for our skills as South African doctors, but things have changed over the years. So before we could step into any position really on the basis of having trained in South Africa and because of our good residency programs, but things have changed now. So I really was faced with the notion of not being able to practice medicine at all, or having to go back to residency. And the irony was, in 2017, I had already met the Canadian forensic pathologists in Toronto who had explained the process to me. And then in 2019, I actually was invited to do a fellowship in Toronto. With the idea, I was chosen as part of the Chang Fellowship, which is really a kind of an outreach program to third world countries, including Africa. We certainly don't think of ourselves as third world in South Africa, but we are regarded as that in the greater part of the world. And the idea was you learn the skills of pathology in North America, and you take it back to your country and you try and improve on, the forensic aspects back home. And then, of course, COVID hit us. So we ended up staying in Canada. Then I was obviously faced with this issue of what do I do now? Because I'm not an anatomical pathologist. I don't qualify to practice. And although Canada and North America, and I think maybe even parts of Europe, they have these positions that are called physician assistants. So you train for 4 years in basic medicine, and then you can do a subspecialty and you can become a quasi forensic pathologist, but you do very simple day-to-day cases. In South Africa, in Canada, it would be your drug overdoses, but I didn't even qualify for that.
Wow.
So that's why I went back into, doing all the Canadian exams, the medical school exams. It took a long time. As you can imagine, I hadn't practiced clinical medicine for years, and I was learning about blood pressure and sexually transmitted diseases and things I hadn't thought about for years. And then got into a program which is very unusual and very rare for a international medical graduate. I was very fortunate enough to have gotten into McMaster. And so now I wipe the sleep from my eyes, and I'm in my 4th year, and I'm writing in 5 months' time, and then hopefully then I can do forensic pathology, or the world is my oyster. I can do anything else. I don't have to go back to forensics because now I'm an anatomical pathologist. So we'll see.
So you basically have your South African specialization, then you're going to have the anatomical pathology specialization, and then if you want to, you can then go on and do your forensic pathology stuff in Canada. So if you went back to South Africa with this, would you then be able to register as an anatomical pathologist back home? Would it be that kind of equivalence?
Yes, absolutely. Right. And I don't know, I know that there was one forensic pathologist who then went on to do anatomical pathology. And I know she works in a private lab in Johannesburg. I imagine she still works there. And I think there are very few of these pathologists who are dual trained. And it's such a sought after niche because, although our forensic training is absolutely first class, certainly our histology is lacking. And I think people like myself who are dual trained will eventually could really be of great benefit to the system in South Africa in terms of, giving those forensic pathologists some dedicated forensic histopathological training as opposed to making them look at malignancies that aren't even in the scope of forensic or unnatural death. So I think it's very exciting to think that perhaps somewhere I could go back and fulfill the Chang criteria in terms of the fellowship that I had and give back to the forensic community back home in South Africa. So it is quite inspiring and exciting to think of that. But yes, I could do both or either.
Well, we lost you for a second, you see, but yes, you can go back and, if you wanted to, and do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's just for me difficult to think. And again, as a non-medical person, I can't imagine how that system is better. Spending 4 years doing full-time anatomical pathology and then a little bit of forensics afterwards, compared to the South African route, I just don't see how you're a better forensic pathologist at the end of that process, having spent most of your time looking at slides as opposed to cutting open bodies and looking, it just doesn't seem to me to make sense. But maybe there's something I'm missing.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And for many years, I certainly was certainly of that opinion as well. What's the use of dedicating and doing it now and going through the motions? It's a completely different ball game. The world of histology and pathology is completely molecular now, and it doesn't really translate into forensic medicine. But having done both systems and having been a fellow in the system in North America, I think there are pros and cons to both, particularly because the systems are so different. In South Africa, we really only dealt with unnatural death. It was not in our jurisdiction to deal with natural death. We only really dealt with natural death if we had a so-called sudden unexpected death, or we had a fairly well individual who hadn't had a medical history, then demise, and we would then investigate that death as to exclude a natural cause. But when you have a coronal system or a medical examiner system, it's a completely different ball game, and so they do look into medical deaths because you're dealing with two different systems with two vastly different resource allocations. Histology is very much done on every single case. So, you are expected to know your histology as well as your forensics. So it like I said, we really have two systems based on what is required of us, what resources we have, what our restraints are, and what our aim is. In South Africa, we were dealing with unnatural death. You didn't necessarily have a microscope. You didn't need a microscope to come towards the cause of death. Whereas, in North America, it is different. And like I said, they do rely a lot on their histology because they look at very different aspects of pathology. And now that is my greyhound, because somebody's
we love dogs jumping in, so it's fun
about that. So I, for a long time, we would look upon the anatomical pathologists and through them, but we stuck in the middle. I really couldn't tell you which I prefer. It's different.
But perhaps that's the good kickoff for our next section, because in South Africa, your forensic pathologists obviously get involved when there's a suspected unnatural death, which should be someone was shot, stabbed, strangled, hit by a car, fell off of a roof while they were fixing a gutter. Like you said, somebody who we didn't expect, perfectly healthy, that suddenly dies, or someone who dies under a medical procedure. And the main role, and I'm simplifying it, in South Africa would then be to determine what caused that death and was it unnatural. It's a very different system in where you were talking about the coroner and the medical examiner. And perhaps let's get into that. How does that system work? Because we always hear about it on TV, but I don't think people realize it's not the same as forensic pathology system. And also in our system in South Africa, the police are in charge of that investigation. The police will make the determination whether they think this is a murder or not, and then present it to the prosecution. It's go into how that's different where you are.
Certainly, and it took me a long time to get my head around it too, because it was so different. So the Coronial system, certainly in Canada, and from one province to another, it's completely different. But in Canada, they practice a Coronial system. So Gerard, where you are in Vancouver, in British Columbia, which is on the opposite side of the world of Canada to me, your Coronial system is based on lay people. They are not medical practitioners. They are lay people who get trained to do death investigation. And I don't use the word unnatural, I use the word death. So any death, they are required to investigate. And it's up to the Coronial system, certainly in BC, well, actually anywhere in Canada, but they're not medically trained. So they will then go back to the office, so to speak, look at the situation of death, the scene of death, and then they will come to and formulate a manner of death. So yes, they have a lot of work in and input in terms of formulating the cause of death, but they are really the sole givers or in charge of manner of death. And then they obviously work together hand in hand with the law. In this province, in Ontario, the coroners are medically trained. So they're all medical doctors. They all have a license to practice, which is slightly different. And they also partake in the investigation of death, and they come towards the manner of death. The difference between the two provinces is the forensic pathologist. In Vancouver, it's very controversial, and I'm not going to give my opinion to it, but there are issues in terms of forensic pathology support and services there. But here in this province, it really is centralized. So the provincial pathology unit is by and large the biggest unit in the province and takes care of all the autopsy investigations, the post-mortem investigations, the use of toxicology, any ancillary studies. But all of that gets referred to the pathology services by the coroner. So the difference is in South Africa, we will have somebody will demise and the police are the first to be called. And they are the first on the scene and they investigate the death. Whereas here, the first on the scene is the coroner. The first person to investigate the death is the coroner. He will then deem it necessary to call in the police, and if necessary, to then refer to the forensic services for a forensic autopsy in order to investigate further the cause of death. The forensic pathologists here then will opine as to the manner of death, whereas in South Africa, we don't give an opinion as to the manner of death at all. And in fact, the manner of death is really up to the magistrate. In South Africa, the magistrate has 5 responsibilities, of which one is to formulate the manner of death. Whereas
so
here,
if you can jump in there, So just to jump in, so the coroner goes out to the scene, whether it's a car accident or a gunshot. Based on what they see at the scene, they determine this looks like it's a murder or a natural death. And then if there's an autopsy needed, it's not the coroner doing the autopsy. Then they call in forensic pathology services. So is the coroner really just, their job is at the crime scene, so to speak?
Yes. In simplistic terms, absolutely, yes. They investigate the death. And if they feel that it might be some sort of unnatural death, then they will refer it on to the forensic pathology services. And actually in Toronto, they share the same building. And it's a very different system. They are run extremely different. They're run by different organizations. There is some collegiality between the two, but certainly they are run as 2 separate entities. It's a referral system. So I am the coroner, Gerard, you are the forensic pathologist. I'm the coroner in a certain jurisdiction. For example, in Toronto, the biggest city of Toronto, I then have a cause of death and I'm concerned that it might be a homicide. I then refer it on to you. We discuss the case. You do the autopsy. You refer back to me, giving me the results. And then I will then formulate, and it's a lot of paperwork, formulate a lot of paperwork. I will then give my opinion as to the cause of death. And then that package then gets sent on to the justice court or the criminal system, who then will take it further. The police play a very interesting role. They do support the coronial system, the coroners. They do help with the investigation. They're almost it's almost outsourced to the police. It's not up to the police. The police and the coroner work together, hand in hand, to investigate the death. And I felt that when I was in that environment, it was absolutely mind-blowing. because, just being in the system for 10 years where we were the coroner and we worked with the police. And because our system was so, Gerard, I don't need to tell you, so fraught with so many issues, we'd get very little information when we got our docket in the beginning of the day. We were lucky if we got the deceased in South Africa. Yeah. We would be extremely lucky if we got the deceased's name, the scene of death, if we got any information regarding that. We really had to put our skills together, and I know you often advocate for investigators to be present during autopsy. You always have been, and we strongly did too, and I'm sure we still do, to try and formulate some sort of team. And when it comes together, it's magic, and when it doesn't, it can be extremely difficult to give a holistic, fulsome death investigation. But certainly, when you do a post-mortem in Canada with a coronial system, before you even start your autopsy, you've got photographs, you've got background information on the decedent. You know who they are, where they are, when they last saw their doctor, what their medication is. You've got a full rundown of family history, everything. So before you'd even open the body or open the body bag, you already know what you're dealing with, which is extremely helpful. The other thing to add, and we haven't really discussed the actual forensic services, but in Canada, and certainly in the province of Ontario, all bodies get CT scanned. So before you've even opened the body bag, you've got a full CT scan of the decedent. You've got background history, you've got family history, you've got medical history, and you've got scene footage. And if it is deemed a homicide, you have the entire investigative unit present during your autopsy, together with a forensic team from the police. So as much as we are taking photographic evidence, so are they. So everything is doubled. It's a completely different setup from the get-go. And in many ways, it's the ideal. It's the gold standard. But sadly, in South Africa, we don't have it.
Guys, before I let you guys carry on, I'd just like to interject and just say hi to everybody that's watching along. We are not live tonight, so but please do drop your comments and questions if you have any, or suggestions for future episodes, rather, or comments on tonight's topic. I'm just going to we're just going to have a little break. Back in a second.
In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, knowing the minds of killers isn't curiosity, it's survival. Subscribe to Profiler Africa now. It's free. Or become a member and help keep the channel alive. Remember, trust nobody.
Before we get back into discussing the gold standard, which is, I must be honest, still being back in Johannesburg, it's a little bit, would be nice if things, if we were confident that things were improving or that there was a little bit of hope this side. The question I want to ask you guys is, now that the both of you have left South Africa and you guys are kind of both pursuing careers in Canada, how do you feel about kind of South Africa now being kind of behind you, and I'm sure you will contribute and you will be involved in a certain degree, but, what are your thoughts on the kind of state of affairs in South Africa now, and what hope is there for us that we can get to these that we can be as efficient and as effective as the environment that you guys are finding yourselves in now?
Sure.
Well, I can step up to this question, and I think it's a great question, Paul. And I think both Gerard and I come from slightly different avenues. We work towards the same cause, and perhaps Gerard can address the SAPs. I can certainly address the forensic aspects. And although I bleat lyrically about the gold standard and CT scanners and actually MRIs as well, and a full toxicology department, and I do believe that, and I get quite emotional about this. I do believe that the work we do in South Africa is God's work. I do believe we still do the right thing. There are a handful of forensic pathologists that are still walking the walk and talking the talk, and I can name them, and they are an absolute inspiration to me with all my virtual autopsies and all the tools of the trade. At the end of the day, we still do the right work. We still do the best work we can, and we are by far the best pathologists because we work on intuition. We work with what we have, and it's very little. And I can tell you from years and years of experience, and still talking to two of my closest friends who still practice today, we do what's right by the decedent. And we are the last voice for the dead, and we take it extremely seriously. And I don't think you could find more dedicated people. That said, coming to Canada was probably the most difficult decision of my life. And there are days that I want to come home tomorrow. My bags are packed, but unfortunately my life situation has changed. But honestly, it's still home, and it's. I think we've got a long way to go, Gerard. I think you can reiterate that, and I don't know if we'll ever get it right, but we've still got those souls that work towards a good ending, and that's all we can hope for.
Is there a way for yourselves and kind of your ilk who have parted to other seas to play a positive contributory role here in South Africa? Like I said, I mean, I agree with you. We always talk about how, we have some of the best, most incredible professionals in the world because they are forced to work under such extreme conditions and with such heavy and kind of ridiculous workloads. But it doesn't cover this kind of scale of the issues that we have here in South Africa, does it? So, it's great to have pockets of excellence, but if that excellence doesn't kind of speak for everybody, then it becomes, that's a worrying thing. Gerard, maybe you'd like to comment from your side.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would imagine that there's not, if you had to take a South African forensic pathologist of 10 years experience and a Canadian one and ask them both to do a gunshot autopsy, probably the South African is going to do that with their eyes closed because they would have done hundreds, if not thousands of those types. So I think, I hear what Candice is saying. I think we still have people that in the context that they're working in do a fantastic job with what little that they have. I think for me, the bigger thing would be there's so many systemic changes that have to take place. I don't think it's the quality of the doctors, of their training. I think it's just the system needs more things to change. They need better mortuaries and better facilities. And so I think it's a systemic thing that has to be fixed, not a person thing, really, if you want to. I know that's the best way I can try and explain it. Touching on what you said just now, Candice, how you'd have that autopsy, the whole investigation team, a big forensic team. Again, I've just finished research with one of my students at the Joburg mortuary. She looked at deaths that took place in the year of 2023, from January to December, only gunshots, stabbings, and strangulations. So basically criminal deaths. And she looked at how often is there a member of the police present at the autopsy. So out of those cases that were gunshot, stabbing, or strangulation, so we didn't even take blunt force trauma because that can sometimes be from a car or just those very clear ones that we can say this is probably a criminal death. There were 975 autopsies done that year on those types of cases. And out of the 975 autopsies of gunshot, stabbing, or strangulation, only 17 of those, 17, was there a policeman present. That's 1.7% of clearly violent crime autopsies were there cops present. So you don't have that information about the crime scene being given to you that you could ask that detective. You don't have the police photographer who's documenting the autopsy for the purposes of the court case. We also looked at forensic exhibits. Like if forensic exhibits were collected by the doctor, in other words, a DNA for a rape kit, a bullet point that was recovered from the body, what else? A weapon that might have been left in the body or something like that. And 50% of the cases where there was forensic exhibits taken, more than a year later, those were still sitting at the mortuary. So, and whereas if the cop had been there, either the detective or the crime scene guy, he or she would have taken those immediately and submitted those to ballistics or submitted those for DNA analysis or wherever else it had to go. And I mean, that's just, it's been like that for years. This is not a new thing. It's been like that. Candice, you could talk about the time that you were there, how often there was a policeman present in, and they're supposed to be, but it's an ongoing fight to get them to actually pitch up. And a lot of them say, well, for what purpose? Why do I need to be there? And if a homicide detective is asking that question, it really makes me wonder whether they should be a homicide a detective. So let's just, double answer to that question.
Okay. But sorry, Paul, to interject. Gerard, I 100% agree with you. But one has to take a step back and have a look at the wood from the trees, because at the end of the day, we just have such a different system. And I think the way it's different in North America, the way they try these cases is so different, because you cannot make a mistake in North America. And I'm just talking about North America, like Canada and America, the same thing. But it's by and large, they practice the same principles. If you go to court, and like I think of all the times I went to court with what I had, and you say what you say, you do what you do, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But it's a completely different scenario in Canada. And I think if we were set in that similar situation, we would have to up our game. Not because it's coming from the bottom, but because it's coming from the top. No court of law in Canada would accept that the policeman didn't collect the bullet, or the clothing is still sitting rotting in the plastic bag in the mortuary. You know what I mean? It comes from the top. And I think that's why the system works. And of course, they've got a lot more money. I mean, I remember working with top class investigators, and I imagine they are the 17 or the 19 who arrived, because that was always the same guys, and you form some sort of a relationship with them almost. And, they still talk the talk, and they still practice good forensic practices and investigation. But, you talk to them and they wouldn't have a car, or there'd be one car for 7 policemen, one cell phone for 7 policemen. I mean, so I'm not surprised they don't come to the autopsy. I think it's the whole system needs to change. And the other thing that's different about forensic medicine at home, and I'm talking about South Africa because it will always be home, and Canada, is that it's so different. You cannot deviate from your autopsy if you're doing a gunshot wound in Toronto. There is a specific form. There are specific photographs. There are specific special dissection techniques that need to be undertaken. And you might, as a South African, roll your eyes and think, it's a waste of time. Some of the pathologists say it's a waste of time. But if I have a gunshot wound on the body surface, whether it be anterior, posterior, lateral, we do a layered dissection from literally, it's like a picture book, from one layer to the next. You can see how that bullet went through the body, because the court requires that, because you're going to have some smart defendant who's going to, lawyer who's going to be like, but how do I know that this is true? And this, they question, everything's about litigation. It's all about the process. You've got to be so careful to not be caught out. Whereas in South Africa, we don't have the time. Our courts don't require that of us. If I say the bullet went in anteriorly, then they take my word for it, because it's different. And it's a completely different set of rules. I mean, can you imagine? We don't even have an X-ray machine. I used to head up under Dr. Robert Ngudi, of course. But Rudaput, we didn't have an X-ray machine. You know who the X-ray machine was? Was some of the forensic officers, because they'd been doing it for years. And you would say, I think the bullet's here, and he'd say to me, no, doc, it's here. And those were our X-ray machines, was these guys with years of experience.
Pathology whisperers.
You have no idea. I mean, you would say, honestly, and I often used to call the guys and say, I need your help. Find me the bullet. Let's do this together. And that's another set of issues, is the forensic pathology services and assistants.
It sounds to me, if you strip it all down to the basics, I find it hard to kind of put any blame in the way of the officers themselves, etc., just because, they're forced to work under such difficult conditions. It's a leadership problem. It's a lack of care. It's maybe a lack of understanding. I mean, let's take for example, this pathology lab that they've been building here in Johannesburg for the last however many years. That originally budgeted at something like 580 million rand. It's already over the 700 million rand mark. It's 98% complete, but they've been saying it's 98% complete for the last 4 years. How do you function when that's the reality? And another question I'd ask is, when you were in your roles in South Africa, was part of your push away from the country just your frustration at not being able to be effective because, when you looked up the leadership chain, people just didn't give a shit? Excuse my language.
No, I mean, and sometimes a bit of foul language is required. I mean, I remember in my time, we had the most inspirational leader. She was a forerunner. She had such vision. I very much think the head of pathology in Toronto is an outstanding human being, and he has such vision and clarity of vision. But let me tell you, my Professor Janine Vellemer had the same clarity, the same insight, the same experience, if not more. And he would attest to this. Michael Plannon is the head here. He would attest he knew Janine Vellemer well. And honestly, the leadership that supported her destroyed her, because they didn't support her, because it was just the most appalling situation because of color, demographics, gender. It was. And at the end of the day, who gets affected? Not the big wigs who come and go in their CEO positions, but the dead, the families. And I believe that many forensic pathologists left because of that, because you were controlled by people who didn't have any idea. Even the previous heads of department thought they were doing right by the ethos that is forensic pathology. And in many ways they did, but honestly, it just was ruined by people in leadership positions, and people with the real insight left and heartbroken.
Yeah. Look, I guess one of the positive things we can do is talk about these things on platforms like this. And hopefully our 30,000 subscribers will, amongst those, there are folks that will help just to carry that message. Do hit subscribe if you haven't already, folks, and share this episode. These are important conversations. Gerard.
I think as Candice alluded to, it was, even for me, it became the frustration of the system, the frustration of the leadership, them not for whatever reasons, not making the decisions that are the right ones for the service or the organization. So that definitely was part of my reason for leaving the police. My reason for leaving Canada is completely different. I was no longer in government. But so I think the system plays a big role, and I agree 100% that what your courts expect from you will force you to change your behavior. And South Africa, if the court doesn't expect you to prove why you didn't do this or why you didn't do that, and maybe that if you say that this is a gunshot wound and this is the entrance, this is the exit, this is how I know because it looks like this, it looks like that, you wouldn't have to have done the other expert assessments or tools or scans to prove that it wasn't something beyond that. So I think it is very much guided by your court's expectation of you. And if that's different, you're going to have to align. Otherwise, all your evidence is going to be rejected. So I guess that's why people I always think in America, we're such a litigious society and everybody sues everybody. That's why when you go to your doctor and you say, I'm having this pain here, they're probably going to send you for a ton of tests. Where in South Africa, the doctor would go, no, that's just heartburn, and you're probably right 99% of the time. But it's not a cover your ass type of system, which is why I think healthcare in America probably costs so much, because you have to do tons of tests, because if you missed one little thing, the amount you're going to be sued for is just in that 1% of cases is just astronomical. So the system does push you into line of what they require, but also if the system's not working properly like we have back home, it just kind of does make it all fall apart.
Okay. Well, guys, I'm sorry to have taken it into as usual on our podcast, when we talk about the realities of law enforcement and these things here in South Africa, it becomes a little bit depressing. So, Gerard, how do we take this conversation back in a more positive direction?
Okay. Well, this is sort of positive, but not 100%. I'm just curious because I've been to countless mortuaries back in South Africa, from the big ones in Johannesburg and in Cape Town, the busiest ones, I would say, to tiny little ones in Prof, where the autopsies, like you said, being done by a doctor who's just done a 6-month course, is not a forensic pathologist. And most of them are just really unpleasant places. There's blood on the floor. The tools are used, not very fancy, sophisticated ones in see on TV. What's the biggest difference that you would say between a forensic mortuary in Canada, where an autopsy is being done, and the ones in South Africa?
Well, I can only attest to having been in 2 facilities. So the one in Toronto, which is everything you imagine and more. There is no blood on the floor. There is music playing. We have downdraft facility. You have everything of everything, and you are made to feel as important as you really are, and you have everything that your heart desires. The difference is you also have. It's been ergonomically set up, so you have natural light. You have. I can't tell you. It's you would actually cry if you see it. You've got assistants who want to be there, who are trained to be there, who study for years just to be a pathology assistant. And all intents and you were to see Dr. Llewellyn doing an autopsy, it's just a pair of scrubs, a simple little plastic apron, and a single pair of gloves. Nothing else, because everything is clean. And, everybody breaks at 1:00 for lunch. One body gets done at a time. So there may be 4 pathologists working in one section, but each pathologist has 2 assistants. There are 3 photographers. There are other people who move the bodies around, and you do one body at a time. So it's completely different. It's a completely different situation. We don't have bodies lying on the floor. We have body bags that are sealed. You have no idea.
No, I've been to them. I'm just remembering, Candice.
And one at McMaster, where I'm training at now, is much smaller, more ones you see on the American TV shows. But the same thing. Your 2 assistants love what they do. To be there. They're 2 hours before you, and they are setting up and raring to go. Nobody doesn't want to be there. Everybody wants to be there, and everybody loves what they do, and that's the big difference. So I mean, can shitty little office somewhere. The difference is that everybody wants to be there. McMaster, we don't have a CT. All right, you've got basic equipment, but everybody wants to be there, everybody shows up, and everybody does their jobs to the best of their abilities. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah. If I may make an attempt at an analogy then. So the labs you're talking about more a bit like maybe CSI Vegas, whereas I mean talking, and I like to use the Braamfontein mortuary as an example. A bit more the Ed Gein house, if you've been watching this new series on Netflix.
Yeah. But that said, I tell my fellow colleagues and my residents how I used to do an autopsy, because obviously the table was too low for me. So I used to have a tire, just the rubber part of the tire. And I used to have the most amazing forensic assistant. His name was Mazibuko. And he'd always get my tire ready with my plastic board on top. And it would be a little bit like a seesaw, but I was good enough. And I knew how to use my equipment and my scissors, and we do amazing work, him and I. And there were some other outstanding citizens. We were a dream team. And sometimes that speaks wonders to, the Vegas CSI, where honestly, and I speak fondly of them, amazing people, but some of those forensic pathologists arrive with the hair and the scrubs that are just so, and full faces of makeup, and they're the most beautiful human beings. And everybody goes to lunch, and everybody has a good lunch, and then you come back up again and you put your scrubs on, and it's so different from what to do and to get. I used to take backlog and then have lunch.
Might we say that the South Africans want to be there?
Yes, I think anyone want to be there. Everybody wants to practice and stuff. The difference is, and Dr. Palan always used to pull me aside and say, you and I are different because we work very hard as South Africans. I can tell you that the average forensic pathologist in Toronto complains because they have 20 homicides a year.
Sure.
We would do more than that a month. And it's not because it's just a different lifestyle, a different work ethic. It's different. We don't complain. I mean, we complain and then we look, it's frowned upon. And, the lazier you are, the worse you are. And it's not always a good thing. We don't know our limits in South Africa. We burn out. Maybe our autopsies aren't that good because we trying to get through the numbers instead of looking at quality. But again, that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, I think we all want to be, because it's the right way. It's what justice is. I can tell you of a case that I think was probably the biggest case I did in my career before I left South Africa, and that was the baby Daniel case. And honestly, although we had very little to work with, we had an outstanding prosecutor, an outstanding investigator, fairly good forensic pathologist. And we all got together and we did what was right by the child. And I think you don't need to have a CT scanner and natural daylight to be able to do a good job.
And I really hope that when this new laboratory in Johannesburg does get put in or open up, then hopefully that'll invigorate people to feel more wanting to. Because I always say, if you don't treat people professionally, you can't really expect them. Like when we used to do training in the police, I mean, the classrooms were dirty. They always had those government hanging blinds. Those blinds that are like these strips, and there's always ones that are broken. The food is terrible. They would literally sitting at like school classroom desks, and these are adult men and women learning to be, detectives. And it's like, if you don't work in a professional environment, it's very difficult to maintain professionalism. So I hope with the new mortuary that would really contribute to people feeling like, I am a professional, actually. I may be the assistant, with a matric, a high school qualification and a little bit of extra training, but I feel like I'm a professional person, this environment. And I mean, that's not going to make bad people good. But I do think it does help contribute to people who have that good aim and heart to just feel more empowered. And hopefully it'll have all the fancy tools and technology also that'll make it nicer. But yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think so much is going to have to change. And we've got currently Dr. Holland, Shakira Holland, and I mean, we've got great people who could take the mothership and really sail with it. But you're absolutely right. It's when you start respecting yourself. I mean, I used to, if there was blood on the floor and head of pathology would walk in Toronto, it was a disaster. You know what I mean? Like you weren't, if you had blood on your scrubs, you change. He used to say, you're not a butcher. If you're going to allow yourself to look like a butcher, you will become a butcher, and we are not butchers. And in many ways, there's a very healthy rivalry between anatomical pathologists and forensic pathologists, because the forensic pathologists think they are better than everybody else, because we are treated like the golden children. And the anatomical pathologists are like, they're not real pathologists, they're half pathologists. But I mean, it's true. In Toronto, you are made to feel like you are God's children. And he makes you feel like that, because that's the only way you're going to feel like you're worth something. If you don't get given a nice set of scrubs, and it's people are as fickle as that, a nice set of scrubs, clean work environment, good coffee, makes a world of difference. Suddenly you're going to step up to that platform. Gerard, I'm interested to hear that you even had food in some of your courses. I mean, I don't think we ever had food in forensics. I lie. Professor Llewellyn often used to spoil us rotten, but still, I mean, that was a mortuary where, you dealt with the smells and the flies and the heat, and it's what you did.
Yeah. Bloody fly prints on the wall. That's what I remember. So you see where flies have landed, and there's little blood marks. Just to give viewers an update and just to elaborate a bit more on the status of this pathology lab they've been building here in Johannesburg. I mean, the Hillbrow building, I don't know if you're aware of this, I wasn't until just now, but it was actually been condemned for years. So that building has been functioning, even though the actual building itself is condemned. So for folks listening, that's one thing to take on board. The second part is, this has been going on since 2019. According to just what I've been looking at now, there's 100 million rand owed on this building to the companies involved in building it, and the money's owed, and they stopped working. And obviously, where's that money? That money is likely not available anymore. It's likely spent on an apartment in Dubai somewhere. So,
yeah, I mean, that's unfortunately, it's not unique to South Africa. I think, I remember the days of the Johannesburg Jet, because we used to have Charlotte McClake. We used to have a lot of multidisciplinary meetings. At that stage, my partner was in ICU, and he worked with Guy Richards in ICU, and we'd often, have our mortality and morbidity meetings there. And the ICU was, forgive me if I stand to correction, but if I remember correctly, was on the 5th floor. And there were only 2 elevators to that particular section. And it wasn't unusual for neither of those elevators to be working, which is a problem if you consider that theatre is on the 2nd floor. So I don't know how it was, so we're working on a condemned building. At least there's a roof over our heads. And you know what? I don't know, Gerard, if you remember, or Paul, if you remember when we had those strikes, and the forensic officers refused to help the forensic pathologists. And I remember at that time, the CEO of Forensic Pathology Services, or he was a doctor, coming into the mortuary and helping us, because now we had, I'm exaggerating, but we had many bodies piling up. And so this gentleman, bless him, felt he was now going to come and help us. And I remember him saying to me, Candice, why do you work without the lights on? And I said to him, I forget his name. I said, Doctor, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. He said, it's so dark. Where are the lights? And I said to him, oh, no. There are no lights. They haven't worked for years. But it's like, I mean, this conversation while we're trying to saw open somebody's head calvarium with an ordinary
Hacksaw.
Because the is obviously not strong enough. I mean, you know what? They didn't even know what we were dealing with. So
cry the beloved country. That's what I say.
Yeah, but I still think, I mean, I don't think we must be, I know you're stuck in the situation and it's easy for us to say in hindsight, but we still have the best people. We still are amazing.
No, this is why we're Profiler is not going anywhere, Candice, because we're here to keep on talking about these things and spreading the word, talking about how not only, I mean, we're all big about celebrating the successes here and really lauding some of the amazing detectives and forensic professionals that we have, and like I say, the best we can do is just continue to do that. Gerard.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the situation. It's up to the politicians to fix it. Unfortunately, it's not things that people who are in the system, like the pathologists, like the mortuary assistants, the individual cop, the detective, can't change the system above them, and that's up to the politicians. And I guess that means it's up to us as voters. I don't know.
Of course it does. Yeah.
So that's why, and those things don't change quickly, and that's difficult. That's all I'm going to say. Difficult.
Yeah, let's just raise awareness. Gerard.
Yep. No, I think that's all the stuff I was hoping we wanted to cover. I don't know, Paul, if you have any other outstanding questions as the layperson's voice, so to speak.
No, not really. I mean, I was really interested in, I wanted us to outline, I think it's so important for us to show the contrast, I mean, you guys are there now at the front line, and the reason that you're able to be in these positions of influence and you're able to kind of ascend in your careers, that side, is because of the incredible skills and the incredible fundamentals that you heard here. Through platforms like this, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that people continue to hear your voices. And my question would be to you, Candice, what is your connection then still to South Africa? How do you kind of communicate back? How do you link up with previous colleagues? And how do you see your path into the future, being able to contribute to changing some of the things that we've spoken about here?
Yeah, so I obviously, WhatsApp is a marvelous platform for communication, emails. I do speak to particular pathologists a lot. Well, actually, Professor Llewellyn, she's retired in Hermanus. We speak often. Dr. Herstel van Staden, I'm still very much in contact with. Dr. Shakira Holland. We are still very much connected. And I hope going forward, once I've obviously got this degree, this AP, I could maybe, have some sort of affiliation with WITS and teach histology for forensic pathology. And if it'll have to be in affiliation with whichever health system I'm working with here, but certainly have some sort of connection back to South Africa, or even on my own time and own resources. I'd love to give back because, I do see a need for that, particularly because I went through the system and know what it's lacking. Obviously, I still have family in South Africa, and obviously, I do want to give back and contribute as much as I can. Because I think we've got such a rich history. We've got, even Gerard, I think you'll agree to this, even the different crimes, the different kind of mechanics of what's unnatural in Canada and South Africa are so different. We are dealing with the opioid crisis right now, whereas in South Africa, I don't even know if fentanyl was a thing. I know amongst the health professionals it was, but I mean, we were dealing, I didn't realize there was a thing like fentanyl, carfentanil, or I never in wildest dreams imagined I'd be doing an autopsy on an 8-month-old who was riddled with fentanyl, because opioids weren't really a thing. So there's so much to teach each other, because it's going to come, I think, and we can teach our colleagues what we're learning here, and vice versa, because it's the
just perhaps on that question. What are the most typical autopsies that have been done? I mean, I know you can only speak to the place you're sort of involved in, but what is I mean, back home, it's a big chunk is like murder related and car accidents. And what's the typical stuff that they deal with in your experience?
Well, when I did my fellowship in 2019, back then, I don't imagine much has changed. Lots of overdoses. Accidental overdoses, and I suppose a fair amount of intentional. Lots of intimate partner homicide, Gerard, which we both very much familiar with. And there are shootings. The difference is that the shootings that occur make the news. Everybody knows about it. And it's mostly drug related or intimate partner homicide related. We have some very strange autoerotic kind of deaths as well. But by and large, they have dedicated tables that just deal with autopsies, dealing with overdoses. It's a huge bulk of the work.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I always say that the context when we're trying to make true crime TV shows this side, part of my pitch is always the fact that you kind of understand the context of somebody like a Ted Bundy because you've seen 500 documentaries about him. But a crime that may at face value look like a similar crime just by the mechanics of it. The context and the social and the kind of the culture that surrounds it here in South Africa often makes these things so much different to the other parts of the world and so much more interesting. And it's a narrative that is not told a lot, so people aren't familiar with it. So there's interest in the fact that it's a kind of a new, interesting context, which I think is a big, like I say, by my true crime idiom, it's one of the positives. It's like, and I think it's important that people understand that. I just wanted to say that, as always, we would like to invite you to come back at some stage to tackle, an individual case potentially and look at something from start to finish. It's something that we always like to do, is kind of set the scene with a guest and talk about their career and the kind of the topic at large. But obviously our viewers do like a deep dive into a particular case, which often tend to illuminate a lot of these issues and give real context to them as well. And also I was just thinking maybe a pathology panel, where we can get some of you and your the Dr. Hollands of the world together, and we do a pathology panel and talk about some of these issues and put it out there so that South Africans can see it and reference it and really understand from yourself and your colleagues what the actual truth is and what the real reality is here in South Africa compared to abroad. And we can start to think about real steps that we as citizens can take to help turn the tide.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a breadth of information and experience out there that we can really use to our advantage.
Absolutely. Gerard, final comments, final words.
No, I mean, thanks. This has been great. I mean, it's like I said, I didn't even understand the intricacies of how these different systems work and the training. And so that's been really interesting for me. And I hope our viewers find it a nice little South Africa-Canada mix-up story. So thank you so much for your time. And I know we're in regular contact anyway as South Africans in Canada. So, but thank you again so much for your time and your expertise and your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you guys? So you guys will be collaborating. You guys you are both in Canada now. I do expect that you'll be kind of like crossing paths, and will that be practically happening, guys? Helping each other out and kind of picking each other's brains when you need to. Is that how?
Absolutely.
I did send me a question the other day, Gerard, and we had a little Yeah, we talk regularly. We are 6 hours apart by airplane, but we talk.
Great.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, good. Guys, and then I'm sure we're also all happy with the results of the rugby yesterday. So for those who are watching, it's the day after the Springboks won the, so there you go, talking about uplifting the nation from a forensic pathology point of view. In the wake of everyone being happy about the rugby as well. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you, Gerard. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that everyone's going to be upset next week when you're back with your normal voice. But yeah, we'll just see how that goes.
Sorry, fans.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to sign out for everyone now. Appreciate it, guys. To everyone watching, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit like, the bell will let you know when we're dropping new episodes. You can also buy us a coffee. The links are all in the explainer below. And yeah, you can become a member of the channel. That, of course, helps us to be sustainable and to grow. And yeah, our next goal is 50,000 subscribers. So help us get there, guys, as quickly as we can. We are looking at bringing some new content in the next couple of weeks. Like I've mentioned previously, we've been having just a few working challenges in that regard, but all hopefully coming to a head and resolving itself. So yeah, look out for some of our longer format content or our documentary format content coming up in the near future. Hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Paul Llewellyn, and we'll be back next week on Profiler Africa.
In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, knowing the minds of killers isn't curiosity, it's survival. Subscribe to Profiler Africa now. It's free, or become a member and help keep the channel alive. Remember, trust nobody.